Have you ever felt so overwhelmed by life's challenges that you didn't even know how to pray? This is the story of a young woman who faced such a season, but through grace and the power of true friendship, she found strength when she thought all was lost. Meet Sarah, a university graduate full of dreams and hopes for the future. Like many others, her next step was to complete the necessary clearance and move on to the next chapter of her life. But life doesn't always go as planned. Sarah quickly found herself stuck in a tough spot. Financial struggles made it impossible to complete her clearance on time. Even finding a job seemed impossible. But despite the challenges, she held on to hope, trusting that things would eventually work out. She knew that everything would fall into place if she just kept pushing forward. And one day, after what seemed like endless waiting, her clearance was finally completed without further obstacles. She breathed a sigh of relief, thankful for this small victory. But the journey wasn't over. With her clearance done, the next hurdle was getting through her service registration. This too proved to be a challenge. She faced one setback after another, with nothing seeming to work in her favor. The process was slow, frustrating, and draining. But through it all, Sarah had a solid support system: her friends. Her friends reminded her time and time again, "What's meant for you will come. Don't lose faith. There's nothing too difficult for God to handle." These words stayed with Sarah, fueling her hope. Though she didn't see an immediate solution, she clung to their encouragement and kept praying. Eventually, after several failed attempts and waiting through multiple batches, her service registration was finally successful. But before she could rejoice, a new challenge emerged. Just as Sarah was preparing to move forward, she faced a health issue that blindsided her. The news left her in tears. It felt like every time she overcame one struggle, another would come rushing in to take its place. Tears flowed as she asked herself, "Why does this keep happening to me?" She was exhausted, mentally, physically, and spiritually. She didn't know where to turn, and for a moment she felt completely lost. But deep inside she held on to the thought, "This too shall pass." And in time, it did. Her health improved and she pressed on, determined not to give up. After overcoming her health struggles, Sarah faced yet another challenge: rejection at her place of primary assignment. Every time she applied to work somewhere, she was turned away. She applied for a reposting, but the process dragged on. The constant rejections and her financial situation began to wear her down. It wasn't just the external battles anymore. Inside, Sarah was losing hope. She became spiritually distant, unable to find the strength to pray. Days passed, and she drifted further from the faith that had once carried her. One day, one of her close friends asked her about her service and how things were going. She opened up about her struggles, the challenges she had been facing, and the overwhelming feeling of defeat. Her friend, sensing her weariness, gently asked, "How's your prayer life?" It was then that Sarah realized how far she had drifted. She hadn't prayed in days, maybe even weeks. But that conversation sparked something in her heart, a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone. A few days later, another friend noticed Sarah was still down. Without her even having to explain, her friend suggested they pray together. They spent hours in prayer, and as they did, Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Her friend encouraged her, saying, "Keep going, don't give up, just keep praising. Even when it's hard, there's strength in you that you can't see right now, but it's there." As they prayed, Sarah remembered the words that had been spoken over her life so many times. "For I know the plans I have for you, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." These words breathed new life into her tired soul. She realized she wasn't alone in this journey. God had a plan, and her friends were there to help her along the way. With time, Sarah started to feel better, spiritually and emotionally. She picked herself up, determined to move forward. Eventually, her reposting was approved, and doors started to open for her. The journey hadn't been easy, but Sarah realized something important. It wasn't just about the external victories. The most significant lesson she learned was the power of friendship and the importance of holding on to faith, even when you don't feel like it. Her friends had been there for her when she was too weak to stand on her own. They had seen her struggles and reminded her of her strength, even when she couldn't see it herself. She thought of the words that had carried her through this season. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion. Sarah's story is a reminder for all of us. Life will throw challenges our way, and sometimes it can feel like too much to bear. But having good friends who encourage you, who support you, and who pray for you, makes all the difference. They lift you up when you're spiritually down, and they help you see the light when everything feels dark. If you're going through a tough season, don't carry the weight alone. Surround yourself with people who will stand by you, who will remind you of your strength when you feel weak. And if you know someone who's struggling, be that friend who lifts them up. Because sometimes all we need is someone to believe in us when we've stopped believing in ourselves. And as Sarah discovered, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose.